The air in the Galactic Common Station tasted like metal and ozone. It was a smell that tried very hard to be clean but failed. Ambassador Lee Chai-won stood for a moment just inside the main docking port. She breathed it in. Her two guards, Jae and Soo-min, stood a step behind her. They did not look at the air or the amazing sights. Their eyes were already moving, slow and calm, seeing everything. The station was a jewel of the galaxy. Light came from everywhere and nowhere. Hundreds of different species moved in the wide hall. Tall ones, short ones, ones with scales or fur or shimmering skin. It was a busy and loud place. Lee Chai-won smoothed the front of her dark gray suit. She was a woman in her 50s. Her black hair streaked with a single, sharp band of silver. Her face was calm, like a still pond. Her eyes were warm but gave nothing away. They began to walk towards the security checkpoint for the diplomatic quarter. This was the inner circle, the safe zone. Only the most important people and their protectors could go there. The checkpoint was run by the Vorith. The Vorith were a strong people. They believed in strength. Their guards were big, with thick gray skin and heavy bones. Their leader was named Grash. He stood by the scanner, looking at every new person with a hard face. Chai-won stepped up. "Ambassador Lee Chai-won of Earth," she said, her voice quiet and clear. Grash looked down at a screen. "Earth, yes, you are expected." His voice was a low rumble. Then he looked at Jae and Soo-min. They were both dressed in simple, dark uniforms with no badges or marks. "Your guards. They must be scanned. And they must declare their weapons." Chai-won gave a small nod. "Of course." Jae stepped forward first. He was a man in his early 30s. He had a kind face, but it was very still. The security arch hummed. Lights flashed over his body. A Vorith guard looked at his own scanner screen. His brow furrowed. He looked at Grash and shook his head, confused. "What is this?" Grash asked. "Your scanner is broken. It shows nothing." The guard tapped the screen. "It is not broken, Commander. It shows no energy signatures. No plasma residue. No dense kinetic materials. Nothing." Grash's eyes narrowed. He pointed at Soo-min. "You, go." Soo-min stepped through the arch. She was younger than Jae with sharp, noticing eyes. The result was the same. The scanner found nothing. No weapons. No hidden devices. Just the simple materials of their clothes and boots. Grash looked from them back to Chai-won. His confusion was turning into a sneer. "Where are their weapons?" he demanded. "They have none," Chai-won said simply. "None?" Grash let out a short, harsh sound. It was not a laugh. "You come to a summit where tensions are high, where words are sharp like knives, and you bring no knives? You bring these." He gestured at Jae and Soo-min as if they were pieces of furniture. "Are your people fools? Or are you just cowards?" A few other delegates nearby slowed to watch. A whisper went through the line. Chai-won's calm did not break. She did not get angry. She offered Grash the same small, polite smile she had used when she first said hello. "Human protection," she said, "is not always something you can see." Grash stepped closer. He loomed over Chai-won. Jae and Soo-min did not move to get between them. They just watched. They watched Grash's hands. They watched the muscles in his neck. They watched the other Vorith guards. "You insult the safety of this place," Grash said, his voice low. "You insult every species here who understands the need for strength. If there is trouble, your soft creatures will be useless. They will be the first to fall. And you will be next." "I trust them completely," Chai-won said. Her voice did not waver. Grash stared at her. He looked at Jae and Soo-min again. They met his gaze without fear and without challenge. It was like looking at two deep, quiet pools of water. It frustrated him. A warrior should show his strength. He should puff out his chest. He should glare back. These humans did none of that. With a grunt of disgust, he stepped aside. "Go in. But know this. Your choice makes you a weakness. It makes this whole summit weaker. I will be watching." "Thank you, Commander," Chai-won said, as if he had offered her a compliment. She walked past him, into the gleaming corridors of the diplomatic quarter. Jay and Sumin followed, their steps silent on the floor. They walked down a long, bright hallway. Their rooms were not far. Only when the door to Chaewon's suite closed behind them did anyone speak. It was Sumin. "His anger is hot," she said. "But it is simple. It is pride. He feels we mock him by not fearing what he fears." Jay nodded. He was looking out the window at the stars. "The TRRK ambassador has a nervous twitch in his left eye stalk. The financial minister from the Kel Union holds his datapad too tight. Grash is not the only source of tension. He is just the loudest." Chaewon sat in a chair. She let out a slow breath. The calm on her face softened. Just a little. It was not fear. It was the look of a person carrying a heavy, fragile thing a very long way. "They see only what is missing," she said. "They cannot see what is there." It was true. To the galaxy, Jay and Sumin were empty spaces. They were holes where weapons should be. A mystery that looked like a mistake. Outside, the station buzzed with politics and old arguments. The summit would start soon. Deals would be made. Threats would be whispered. Many would rely on the visible strength of their guards, on the guns and blades at their sides. Lee Chaewon looked at her two guards. Jay was now checking the room's airflow vents. Not with suspicion, but with simple interest. Sumin was placing their few bags in a pattern that made sense only to her. They were not carrying guns. They were carrying something else. A history. A terrible understanding of how fights start and how they end. They were experts in the moments before the shouting, before the first spark of violence. Their tool was not a trigger. It was attention. A level of attention so deep it could see a conflict coming like a storm on the horizon. But this secret was a dangerous one. If the galaxy knew what they truly were, they would not see peacekeepers. They would see a new, frightening kind of weapon. They would see a threat to every warrior's purpose. So the humans had to wear their weakness like a shield. They had to let the Grashes of the universe laugh and call them cowards. Jay finished his check of the room and gave Chaewon a single nod. All was well. For now. Chaewon looked back out the window at the sea of stars. Somewhere out there, billions of humans lived their lives. They knew nothing of this delicate, dangerous game being played. They did not know that their best defense was a secret that had to stay hidden, carried in the calm hands and watching eyes of two people who had trained their whole lives not to fight, but to see, and seeing to understand, and understanding to stop. The first part of the summit would begin in a few hours. The mystery of the defenseless human guards was already a topic of gossip. It was a small puzzle in a hall of giant problems. But like a single crack in a dam, small things can sometimes be where the pressure starts. The Grand Convocation Chamber was a bowl of light and sound. Representatives from 100 species filled tiered seats that spiraled upwards. In the center, on the main floor, was a round table for the principal species. This was where Lee Chaewon sat, a small data slate before her. Jay and Sumin stood behind her chair. They were like two quiet shadows. All around them, other diplomats had their guards. The Vorath guards, like Grash, stood stiff and alert. Their hands rested on the butts of their large energy rifles. The Kel Union's protectors were slimmer, with needle-thin pistols on their hips. Their eyes glowed with a soft blue light from enhanced vision. Every species showed its strength, its readiness, its promise of violence if things went wrong. Except for the humans. The talk began. It was about trade routes through a newly settled star cluster. The words were polite, but the meanings underneath were sharp. A TRRK delegate, its voice a clicking hiss, made a claim about an ancient asteroid mine. A Kel minister, with skin like polished stone, countered with a recent treaty scan. Jay did not listen to the words. Not exactly. He listened to the music behind them. He heard the tightness in the TRRK's hiss. A slight rise in pitch at the end of its sentences. Stress. He saw the Kel minister's fingers, which were long and thin, tap a slow, steady rhythm on the table.
A calming technique.
The minister was trying to control his own irritation. Sumin watched the bodies. She saw the Vorath commander, Grash, who was standing against the far wall. He was not looking at his own ambassador. He was staring at Jay and Sumin. His arms were crossed, his face a mask of open disgust. Every few minutes, he would shake his head slightly and mutter something to the guard next to him. A joke at their expense. Sumin noted it and let it go. His anger was a simple, steady flame. Predictable. Her eyes moved on. She saw a small aide from a neutral system, a furry creature like a tall otter, flinch every time a loud voice rang out. The aide was holding a drink, and the liquid trembled. Fear. Raw, simple fear in a room full of powerful beings. That was a point of pressure. A person who might run or scream and set off a chain reaction if things got bad. This was their work. They were mapping the room not by its politics, but by its emotions. They were finding the lines of tension, the points of fear and pride and anger, as clearly as if they were drawn in bright light. A break was called. Delegates stood up, stretching, moving to talk in small groups. The noise level rose. Chai-Won turned to Jay and spoke softly. The Kel minister is hiding something. His offer is too good. Jay gave a tiny nod. He blinks 3 times in quick succession when he states the resource yield. It is a tell. He is lying about the numbers. Noted, Chai-Won said. She moved away to speak with the TRRK delegate. A calculated move to unsettle the Kel. Jay and Sumin stayed at their post. They did not talk to each other. They did not need to. Their training was the same. Their understanding was the same. They watched the flow of the crowd. Near a refreshment table, a problem began. A Vorith junior delegate, full of young pride, bumped into a smaller delegate from the Ivan compact. The Ivan were delicate, with long limbs and large, sensitive eyes. The Voritha's drink splashed on the Ivan's silken robe. It is nothing. You are in the way. The Vorith grunted, not apologizing. The Ivan delegate recoiled, its large eyes blinking rapidly. This garment is a cultural symbol. Your carelessness is an insult. The volume rose. Other delegates turned to look. The young Vorith, embarrassed now in front of others, puffed out his chest. You accuse me? Your whole species hides behind ceremony and fine cloth. Grash, from across the room, saw the commotion. His head snapped towards it. He pushed off the wall and began striding over, his heavy boots thumping on the floor. His hand went to his weapon, not to draw it, but to show it was there. The message was clear. This was how it started. A small spark. Bride. A crowd. An armed, angry guard moving in. Jay and Sumin moved. They did not run. They did not shout. They simply walked, one to the left, one to the right, in a slow, calm arc that placed them between the growing argument and Ambassador Chai-Won, who was still talking nearby. They did not look at the angry young Vorith. They did not look at the trembling Ivan. Jay looked at Grash. Sumin looked at the crowd of onlookers. Grash reached the pair. He loomed over the Ivan. You will quiet down, he commanded. This is not a place for your whining. The Ivan shrank back, which made the young Vorith look even more proud. The tension was a wire pulled tight. Jay, standing a few feet away, spoke. His voice was not loud. It was flat, clear, and carried no emotion. Commander Grash. Grash turned. Annoyed. What do you want, empty hand? The station's environmental systems. Jay said, still in that flat tone. They are sensitive to loud noises in this sector. For safety. A sudden shout can trigger a localized humidity alert. It would soak everyone here. He gestured vaguely upwards. It was a lie. Complete, simple lie. But Jay said it with such absolute certainty, such boring technical detail, that it made Grash pause. His anger hit a wall of confusing information. A humidity alert? What? In that second of pause, Sumin acted. She did not go to the angry ones. She went to the scared one. She stepped smoothly to the Ivan delegate's side. She did not touch it. She bent her knees slightly to lower her height, making herself less threatening. She spoke, her voice soft and melodic, completely different from Jay's flat tone. The color of the stain, Sumin said, looking at the robe. It is a deep blue on silver. It looks like the nebula of first flight, does it not? A happy accident. A sign of good travel on your new trade routes. The Ivan delegate, startled, looked from Sumin's calm face down to its robe. The anger in its large eyes flickered, replaced by confusion, then by a glimmer of thought. The nebula? I had not seen it that way. The young Vorith now ignored, deflated. The moment for his big scene was gone. Grash was still trying to process the nonsense about humidity alarms. The tension left the air like a sigh. The crowd, seeing no more drama, began to drift away. Grash glared at Jay, then at Sumin. He had come to solve a problem with his presence, with the threat of his weapon. But the problem had dissolved before he could use it. It had been dissolved by words. Strange, quiet words. He leaned close to Jay. Your tricks are for children, he hissed. Our duty is to prevent fires, Jay said, still looking past Grash as if at some distant point. Not to praise ourselves for putting them out. Grash turned and walked away, frustration in every step. Back at their post, as the chamber filled again for the next session, Sumin spoke under her breath to Jay. The Ivan's fear was greater than its pride. A path was there. The Vorith youth's pride was shallow. It needed an audience. Grash's anger is deep. It needs a target. We gave him neither. Chai-Won returned to her seat. She had seen it all from a distance. She did not thank them. She did not praise them. Their success was not in victory, but in nothing happening at all. It was a void, an absence of crisis. But Grash and others like him only saw the absence of action. They saw guards who did not draw weapons, who did not stand tall and threaten. They saw passivity. They could not see the web of cause and effect that Jay and Sumin had seen forming. They could not see the pressure points they had gently pressed to release the steam. To the galaxy, it was just an argument that fizzled out. A boring end to a small scene. Jay and Sumin resumed their positions. Their faces were calm once more. The secret of their work was safe. It was hidden in the quiet moments that everyone else forgot. They had stopped a spark today. No one would ever know. And that, they had been taught, was the highest form of success. To carry the weight of disasters that never were. To be the reason the galaxy kept turning, and no one ever knew why. The grand convocation was over for the day. The mood shifted from tense politics to careful socializing. A gala was held in the station's Starview atrium. It was a huge room with a clear dome showing the swirling colors of the nearby nebula. Soft music played, a blend of sounds from different worlds. Delegates mingled, holding delicate glasses, trying to talk without saying too much. Lee Chai-Won moved through the crowd with a practiced ease. She smiled, nodded, and exchanged empty pleasantries about art and music. Jay and Sumin followed her, always a few steps back. Their eyes never stopped moving. The room was full of potential problems. There were servants carrying heavy trays. There were floating drones that delivered drinks. There were tight groups of diplomats from rival species. Their laughter too loud, their eyes too sharp. Jay watched Akel and a TRRK standing close together. Their bodies were angled away from each other, a clear sign of dislike. Sumin noted a power conduit on the far wall that was humming slightly off-key. A minor thing. The night wore on. Grash and his Vorith guards were stationed at the main doors. They looked out at the party with scorn. To them, this was not important work. This was talking. Grash's eyes kept finding Jay and Sumin. His dislike for them was a cold, hard stone in his stomach. Then, it happened. A service drone, a floating disc meant to collect empty glasses, was coming back to the kitchen. It moved near a support column. From a hatch high on the column, a maintenance bot dropped down, its movement sudden and jerky. The two machines did not see each other. They collided with a crunch of metal. The service drone spun away, crashing into a table. The maintenance bot reeled, its programming confused. A sharp spark flashed from its front panel where the impact had damaged it. The spark touched something inside. The bot's central processor shorted. Its simple safety protocols failed. Its two front arms, which were meant for fine repair work, began to spin wildly. They were not weapons, but they were made of hard metal, and they spun with the force of small engines. They became blurs of sharp edges. A high-pitched whine filled the air near the column. The bot lurched forward, not towards anyone, but in a blind, malfunctioning stagger. The spinning arms sliced through a decorative plant, shredding it. It clipped the edge of a sofa, sending stuffing into the air. Screams erupted. The music stopped. For a second, everyone froze, trying to understand what they were seeing. This wasn't an attack. It was an accident, but it was a deadly one. The bot was moving towards a cluster of delegates from a small, defenseless system. "Clear the area." Grash's voice boomed over the panic. He and two of his guards stepped forward, their rifles coming up. But they hesitated. The bot was moving in an unpredictable zigzag. The room was crowded. A missed energy bolt could hit a delegate or crack the viewing dome. The risk was too great. "Use low stun." Grash ordered. One guard fired. A blue ring of energy shot out. It missed the weaving bot and hit a wall screen, which went dark. The bot, startled by the noise and light, changed direction. Now it was heading towards the center of the room, where more people were scrambling to get away. Chai-Won was there. Jae and Sumin were already moving before she could give an order. They did not look at the bot as a thing to destroy. They looked at it as a problem of physics and motion. Jae saw the path. The bot was bouncing off obstacles, its course changing with each impact. He did not run at it. He ran to where it was going to be. He passed a table with a long, heavy cloth. In one smooth motion, he pulled the cloth off, sending plates and glasses clattering. He held the cloth like a net. Sumin did not follow him. She ran in the opposite direction towards the wall. She had seen the humming power conduit earlier. Next to it was a small, red panel she had identified as a manual override for the atrium's environmental systems. The bot spun towards a group of fleeing delegates. Jae stepped into its path. He did not try to grab the spinning arms. That would have cut his hands off. He threw the heavy tablecloth over the top of the bot's main body, not the arms. The cloth snagged on something. It did not stop the bot, but it blinded its top sensors. The bot slowed, confused, its wild path becoming a tighter circle. "Water main," Sumin shouted, not to Jae, but to the room, her voice cutting through the noise. She wasn't asking. She was telling. She slammed her palm against the red panel. Everyone, including Grash, flinched. They expected sprinklers. They were wrong. From a grill in the floor directly in front of the confused bot, a powerful jet of white mist erupted. It was the fire suppression system for the kitchen below, a concentrated blast of cold, wet chemical foam. Sumin had triggered a localized flood. The foam hit the bot like a wall. The cloth over it grew heavy and soggy. The spinning arms choked, the foam gumming up their motors. With a final, sad whir, the arms slowed, then stopped. The bot, now covered in dripping white foam, gave a beep and settled onto the floor, inert, silence. The whole fight had taken less than 20 seconds. The room was a mess of overturned furniture, spilled drinks, and one very foamy, broken machine. But no one was hurt, not even a scratch. Delegates slowly stood up from where they had ducked. They stared at the scene. They looked at the foamy bot. Then they looked at the two human guards. Jae was calmly peeling the wet cloth off the machine. Sumin was closing the red panel, her face as calm as if she had just turned off a light. They had not fought. They had not fired a shot. They had used a tablecloth and a fire system. They had turned the room itself into a tool. Grash stood with his rifle half-raised, useless. His face was a storm of emotions. Shock, understanding, and finally a deep, burning shame. His weapon, his symbol of strength, had been a risk. Their empty hands had been the solution. Chai-Won walked over to the bot, stepping around the foam. She looked at it, then at Grash. "A malfunction," she said, her voice carrying in the quiet room. "A shame. But thankfully, it seems to be over." An aide from the station's engineering team rushed in, apologizing profusely. The cleanup began. The party was over. People started to leave, talking in hushed, amazed voices as they walked back to their quarters. The silence between Jae, Sumin, and Chai-won was comfortable. They had done their job. Later, in her suite, Chai-won looked at them. The foam was a clever touch. Sumin nodded. Water would have conducted electricity. The foam was non-conductive, safer. The manual was by the panel. Jae was looking at his hands. The cloth was the right weight. It confused its spatial sensors. It did not know which way was up. They spoke about it like engineers reviewing a project. There was no pride, no excitement, just analysis. Out in the station, the story was already spreading. The defenseless human guards had stopped a rogue machine. They had done what armed warriors could not. They had done it without violence. To some, it was a curious fact. To others, it was a hint of something strange. To Grash, sitting alone in the security office watching the replay, it was an insult that cut to his core. They had shown him up. They had made his strength look clumsy and dangerous. His shame curdled into a hard, cold anger. They might be clever. They might be quick. But they were not warriors. And he needed to prove it. He needed to see them break. He needed to prove that when faced with real, deliberate violence, their tricks would mean nothing. The idea began to form in his mind. A challenge. A direct, honest test of strength. In their room, Jae and Sumin prepared for sleep. The event in the atrium was already behind them. It was a solved problem. Their minds were already moving to the next day, to the quiet tensions they would have to watch for, to the hidden fears they would have to soothe. The secret of what they were remained safe, hidden behind the simple, obvious fact that they had used a tablecloth and a fire extinguisher. The galaxy saw cleverness. They did not see the years of training that made that cleverness possible. They did not see the calm that allowed two people to see a solution where everyone else saw only panic. For now, the secret was still a secret. But the spotlight was on them. And a spotlight, they knew, was a dangerous place to hide. The day after the gala was quiet. Too quiet. The station's usual hum of activity felt muted, like the air before a storm. People looked at the human delegation differently now. No longer with simple scorn, but with a confused curiosity. This made Jae and Sumin more alert, not less. Attention was a danger. They took a morning walk with Ambassador Chai-won through the station's central park, a dome filled with alien plants from peaceful worlds. It was a routine, a show of normalcy. Chai-won admired a flower with silver leaves. Jae and Sumin watched the paths. Commander Grash found them there. He did not come with guards. He came alone, his heavy steps purposeful on the gravel path. He planted himself in front of them, blocking their way. His broad chest was puffed out, his gray skin tight with tension. "Ambassador," he said, his voice a low growl. He ignored Chaewon's polite nod. His eyes were fixed on Jae. "You." A word. Jae did not move from his spot beside Chai-won. "I am on duty, Commander." "This is about duty," Grash said. The air around him seemed to vibrate with his anger. "Your little show last night. You think it was impressive. It was a solution to a problem," Jae said. His voice was flat, giving Grash nothing to grab onto. "A trick," Grash snapped. "A clever trick with a cloth and some foam. You got lucky. A real threat would have cut you to pieces." He took a step closer, invading Jae's space. He was a head taller and twice as broad. "You hide behind your cleverness because you have no strength. You have no honor." Chai-won spoke, her tone calm but firm. "Commander, this is not the place for." "The place is perfect," Grash interrupted, not looking at her. He kept his burning eyes on Jae. "It is a peaceful garden. Place for talk. Which is all you seem to be good for." Jae said nothing. He just looked back at Grash. His expression was not blank. It was attentive, like a doctor observing symptoms. He saw the tightness in Grash's jaw, the slight tremble in his left hand, which was clenched at his side. This was not just anger. This was humiliation seeking a release. Grash saw the calm in Jae's eyes, and it was like fuel on a fire. With a sudden, violent motion, he shoved Jay hard in the chest with both hands. The push was powerful. It was meant to knock Jay off his feet, to send him sprawling into the silver-leafed bushes. It was a physical insult, a clear challenge. Jay did not brace. He did not resist. He let the force move him. He took 2 quick steps backwards, his body flowing with the impact, his arms moving in a small circle to keep his balance. He ended up standing a few feet away, still upright, still calm. He had absorbed the violence and let it pass through him. Leaving him unchanged at IT was the most frustrating response possible. Grash stared, his hands still out. He had thrown his best insult, and it had been swallowed by a pool of water. "You see," Grash said, his voice now loud enough for other park visitors to hear. They were stopping to watch. "No fight, no spirit. You are empty. You are a shell they put a uniform on." He was speaking to the crowd now, justifying himself. "This is what Earth sends to protect its people? Things that will not even stand their ground." Jay finally spoke. His voice was still quiet, but it carried in the hushed park. "It is not cowardice to choose not to add violence to a violent moment. It is control." The words hung in the air. They were not the words of a soldier. They were the words of a philosopher. To Grash and the other warrior species watching, they sounded like weak excuses. But something in their certainty grated. "Control?" Grash spat the word. "You have no control. You have only fear. You are afraid to fight because you know you will lose. Your way is a path for the weak." He pointed a thick finger at Jay's face. "I will prove it. In front of everyone. A test. A real test." He turned his head to include Chai-1 and Sumin. "A cultural exchange. In our training arena. Your art against ours. Let the galaxy see what happens when your tricks meet real strength. Let us see this control when you are facing someone who is not a broken machine." It was a formal challenge, wrapped in the polite language of cultural exchange. But everyone knew what it was. A duel. A public stripping of pride. Chaiwan's face was a mask. "We are here for diplomacy, Commander. Not for spectacles. This is diplomacy." Grash insisted, a hard smile on his face. "We show each other our true selves. We show our core. Your guards show peace? Good. Let them show it against my best training officer. If their peace is strong, they have nothing to fear." He had trapped them. Refusing would confirm his accusation of cowardice to the entire station. It would undermine every word Chai-1 spoke. Accepting meant stepping into his world, a world of force, where their greatest strengths would be hardest to use. Jay and Sumin exchanged a single glance. It was a full conversation. They saw the risk. They saw the danger of exposure. But they also saw the greater danger of letting this anger fester. Grash was a pressure point in the station's social fabric. He had to be managed. Sumin gave a tiny, almost invisible nod. Jay looked back at Grash. "We accept the cultural exchange." Grash's smile widened, showing sharp teeth. It was the smile of a hunter. "Tomorrow, midday cycle. Do not be late." He turned and marched away, his victory heavy in his step. The small crowd began to whisper and drift apart. The quiet of the garden returned, but it was different now. Back in their quarters, the door sealed, Chai-1 let out a long, slow breath. "He is forcing our hand. He is a simple equation," Sumin said, her mind already working. "His pride is wounded. He believes strength is only one thing. We must show him it is another. Without showing him too much." "That is the line," Jay said, sitting down. He looked at his hands again, the hands that had not raised to block the shove. "We must lose without appearing weak, or win without appearing strong. It is a very narrow path. They will expect a fight," Sumin said. "They will expect strikes, blocks, the clash of force. We must not give them that. We must give them something they do not have a name for." They began to talk in low voices. They discussed Vorath anatomy, their center of gravity, their cultural reflexes, the need to dominate, to overpower. They were not planning a fight. They were planning a lesson, a demonstration of a different principle. The news spread across the station like an electric current. The strange, defenseless humans were going to face a Vorath warrior in the training ring. It was the main topic of conversation. Most believed it would be a short, brutal humiliation. A few, after the incident with the bot, wondered. That night, Jay and Sumin did not train. They did not practice strikes or moves. They meditated. They sat in silence, focusing on their breath, on the calm center within themselves. They practiced letting go of the idea of winning, of losing, of fear. They prepared not for combat but for clarity. The secret of what they were, the years of neural training, the somatic control, the hyperempathy, all of it was a tool for one purpose: de-escalation. To de-escalate a single, angry Vorath in a ring, in front of a bloodthirsty audience, would be their hardest test yet. They were not going to fight him. They were going to try to understand him. And in understanding, end the fight before it truly began. It was a risk that could expose everything. But the greater risk was letting the galaxy believe that humanity's only answer was the answer. Grash understood. As the station's artificial night cycle began, Jay lay in the dark. He thought not of the coming challenge, but of the small, scared Ivan delegate from the day before. He had soothed one fear. Tomorrow he had to face a different kind of fear, the fear of being seen as weak, which in a warrior's heart was the deepest fear of all. And he had to face it without ever showing a single weapon. The training arena was not a friendly place. It was a circle of hard, gray matting under bright white lights. Around it rose tiers of seats, and today they were packed. Every species on the station seemed to be there. The air buzzed with low talk and the smell of different bodies packed close together. It was not a sporting event. It was an autopsy. Everyone had come to see the humans taken apart. Commander Grash stood at one side of the ring. Next to him was a Vorath warrior even larger than him. This was Baran, his best trainer. Baran wore light training gear. In his hands he held a long, heavy staff. It was not a weapon for killing, but it could break bones. It hummed with a low-energy field that would deliver a painful shock on contact. This was a tool for demonstrating dominance, for causing hurt without death. At the other side stood Ambassador Li Chai-1, Jay, and Sumin. Jay and Sumin wore the same simple, dark uniforms. They had no gear. Their hands were empty. Chai-1 leaned close to Sumin, who would be the one to face Baran. "Remember the flow?" Chai-1 whispered, her face pale but composed. "His anger is a current. Do not stand in it. Guide it away." Sumin nodded. Her eyes were calm. She was not looking at the massive Baran. She was breathing slowly, centering herself. She was letting go of the noise, the lights, the watching eyes. She was making the world small. Just the circle. Just her. Just the problem in front of her. A station official, a nervous-looking Kel, stood in the center. "This is a cultural exchange of combat arts," he announced, his voice thin. "To first contact, a demonstration of control. No killing blows." The crowd rumbled. They knew this was not about culture. This was about truth. Baran stepped forward. He slammed the butt of his staff on the mat. "Tum." He stared at Sumin, his eyes narrow with contempt. He expected to see fear. He saw nothing. This made him angrier. Sumin stepped into the ring. She looked very small. There was no signal to begin. Baran simply attacked. He believed in direct force. He lunged, the staff whipping through the air towards her ribs. It was a fast, powerful strike meant to end things quickly. Sumin did not block. If she tried to block that force with her arms, they would shatter. She moved. She stepped inside the arc of the swing, so close to Baran that the staff passed harmlessly behind her back. It was not a retreat. It was an entry. Baran grunted in surprise. He tried to shove her away with his free hand. Sumin turned her shoulder, letting the push spin her around. She ended up at his side, one hand resting lightly on his elbow for a fraction of a second. Not to grab, but to feel. To feel the tension in his muscle, the direction of his weight. The crowd murmured. He had missed. He turned, swinging the staff in a low arc at her legs. Sumin simply lifted one foot, letting the staff pass beneath it, then placed it down again. It looked effortless, like stepping over a puddle. She was not fighting him. She was avoiding him, but it was an avoidance that put her always just where he was not. Like water flowing around a stone. Baran's breathing grew heavier. His attacks became more furious, less controlled. He was used to meeting resistance, the clash of weapons, the satisfying impact. Here there was nothing. She was a shadow. He was expending all his energy on the air. Sumin moved in a soft, continuous circle around him. She never struck. She never grabbed. She touched him only with fleeting, gentle contact. A tap on the wrist as he raised the staff, a brush against his back foot to unbalance his stance. These were not attacks. They were suggestions, corrections. She was reading his body like a page of text, and with each tiny touch, she was turning the page. The crowd. It began to look strange. It did not look like a fight. It looked like a master and a student, where the student was clumsy and wild, and the master was gently showing him where he was wrong. The mighty Baran was huffing and swinging. The small human woman was calm and untouched. Grash watched, his face like stone. This was worse than a quick defeat. This was a humiliation in slow motion. Baran, sweating now, roared in frustration. He dropped all technique. He charged at her, the staff held like a spear, aiming to run her through. This was the moment of pure, blind aggression. Sumin did not run. She sidestepped, but not completely. She let the tip of the staff graze the fabric of her uniform. As it passed, she reached out. Not for the staff. Not for his arms. With 2 fingers, she pressed lightly, precisely, into a point where Baran's neck met his shoulder. It was not a strike. It was a press. A signal. Baran's charge stopped. His entire right arm, the one holding the staff, went limp. The nerves there had been overwhelmed by the precise pressure. The heavy staff clattered from his fingers and hit the mat with a dull sound. Silence. Baran stared at his own numb hand, bewildered. He flexed his fingers, but they would not obey. Sumin took 2 steps back. She gave a small, respectful bow of her head. The fight was over. She had ended it without throwing a single punch. She had taken his weapon not by force, but by making his body refuse to hold it. The arena was utterly quiet. No one cheered. They were confused. What had they just seen? Baran was not hurt. He was not bleeding, but he was utterly defeated. The Kel official stammered. The exchange is concluded. Sumin walked back to her side of the ring. Her face was still calm, but a faint sheen of sweat was on her brow. The mental effort, the absolute focus, had been immense. Chai One placed a hand on her shoulder. It was all the praise she would get or need. Grash stormed into the ring to check on Baran, who was now shaking, feeling back into his arm. Grash looked from his warrior's confused face to Sumin's calm one. His victory had turned to ash. She had not beaten Baran with strength. She had made his strength irrelevant. He turned to the crowd, to the watching ambassadors. His voice, when it came, was rough with suppressed rage. "Tricks!" he shouted. "More tricks, pressure points and dancing. This is not combat. This is deception." Ambassador Chai One stepped forward. Her voice was soft, but it carried across the silent arena. "It is not deception, Commander. It is a different language. Baran speaks the language of force. My guard speaks the language of the body." She did not meet his violence. She listened to it, and she answered by asking it to stop. She looked around at the hundreds of alien faces, many of them warriors. "They do not practice war," she said, and the word war echoed in the space. "They practice the end of war, before the first blow is thrown. Their goal is not to defeat an enemy. Their goal is to have no enemy at all." The words hung in the air, stark and strange. To many, they sounded beautiful but impossible. To others, they sounded like a threat, a way of thinking that could make their entire way of life, the honor of the warrior, the glory of battle, seem stupid and childish. The crowd began to break apart, talking in urgent, hushed groups. The humans had not been humiliated. They had done something worse. They had asked a question no one knew how to answer. Back in the safety of their quarters, The door locked. Chaewon's calm finally cracked. It was a small crack. She sat down heavily. That was too close, she said. You showed them something. I showed them only an end without injury, Sumin said, her own hands trembling slightly now from the after effect of her focus. I gave them a puzzle. Jay was looking out the viewport. The puzzle is the danger. They will not just be confused or angry, like Grash. Some will be curious. And curiosity is how secrets are found. They had won the day. They had proven their way had value. But in doing so, they had pulled back the curtain just a little. The galaxy had seen that the humans' defenselessness was not weakness, but a choice. And now, the most dangerous minds in the galaxy would start to ask the real question. Why? What was the source of that calm? That precision? That was not just training. That was something else. And if it could make a Vorith warrior drop his weapon with a touch, what else could it do? The secret was still safe. But it was no longer hidden in shadow. It was standing in bright light, asking everyone to understand it. And the first rule of their training was this: when something is truly understood, it is either accepted or it is destroyed. The silence in their suite was thick. It was the silence after a great noise, where the ears still ring. Ambassador Chai-Won did not move from her chair. Jay stood by the door, not guarding it, just being near it. Sumin sat on a low couch, her eyes closed, still breathing slowly, letting the last of the combat focus drain away. They had won. But the feeling in the room was not victory. It was the careful, quiet tension of surgeons after a difficult operation. The patient was stable, but a dangerous infection could still set in. It is time, Chai-Won said finally. Her voice was soft, but it cut the silence. We must speak of the fracture. Jay and Sumin looked at her. They knew what she meant. The line had been crossed. The galaxy had seen too much. The secret they carried was no longer a silent, invisible shield. It was a shape now, a silhouette in the light. And shapes could be studied. Shapes could be copied. Shapes could be feared. Chai-Won looked at Sumin. The touch you used on Baran, the precise point. They will analyze that. They will see it was not luck. It was not a trick. It was knowledge. Specific, medical, intimate knowledge of another species' body. Sumin nodded. It was necessary to end it cleanly. It was, Chai-Won agreed. But it was a clue. And now the smart ones out there, they have that clue. She leaned forward, her hands clasped tightly. We must remember the core truth. Why this must stay hidden. She was not asking. She was reminding them. It was a ritual, a reinforcement of the most important rule. Jay spoke, his voice a low murmur. Because if the galaxy knows what we truly are, they will not see peacekeepers. They will see the ultimate weapon. Sumin finished the old lesson. Her eyes were open now, dark and serious. Tell me, Chai-Won said, not to test them, but to hear the words aloud, to make the danger real in the room. From the beginning. What are you? Jay took a deep breath. He began to speak, not like a soldier, but like a scholar. We are not soldiers. We are not warriors. We are the final stage of a different discipline. We are trained from childhood, selected for empathy, for pattern recognition, for emotional control. Sumin continued, her voice joining his in a practice duet. Our training is neural, psychological, somatic. It is not about muscles. It is about the mind-body link. We learn to read microsignals. A flush of blood under an alien's skin. A change in pupil size. A tremor in a hand holding a glass. These are the first whispers of violence. We learn to hear them, Jay said. To see the storm before the first cloud forms. Our only goal is to stop that storm. To calm the weather inside another being. Chai-Won nodded slowly. And how? With our own bodies, Sumin said. With our voices. A tone, a posture, a word placed at the exact right moment. We speak to the subconscious, to the animal brain that feels fear and anger. We say, you are seen, you are understood, you are safe. We do not command. We suggest. Jay looked at his own hands. And if that fails, if the violence moves from mind to body, we use the same knowledge. We know how a body works, where its levers are, not to break it, to pause it, to ask it politely to stop, like I did with Baran's arm. It is a request, made with physical language. It sounded beautiful. It was beautiful. It was the product of centuries of human study into conflict, trauma, and peace. It was their greatest achievement. And why? Chaewon's voice grew even quieter. Is this beautiful thing our greatest secret? Why is it a threat that could shatter the galaxy? Sumin's face became pale. Because the warlike species will not see peace. They will see manipulation. They will see a way to strip a warrior of his will. To make their proudest fighters lay down arms because of a word, a look, a touch. They will call it psychic warfare. They will call it mind control. Jay looked out at the stars again, as if he could see the empires out there. They will reason. If humans can do this to calm, what stops them from learning to do it to incite? To make allies turn on each other with a whisper? To make a leader doubt his own mind? The very idea of free will in their eyes would be threatened by our existence. Exactly, Chaiwon whispered. Our defenselessness is our shield. It makes us look harmless so they do not look deeper. But our secret, the truth of our trained, purposeful empathy, is a weapon in their eyes. A weapon that does not conquer territory, but conquers the self. To a species built on conquest and honor, that is a terror worse than death. They would unite to burn us out of the stars to feel safe in their own minds again. The room felt cold. The weight of it was immense. Billions of lives, resting on the perception of a few. The humans of Earth went about their lives, believing their diplomats were protected by clever, unarmed guards. They did not know the guards were the true diplomats. And they did not know that their existence was a hair's breadth from being declared a galactic plague. The summit concludes tomorrow, Chaiwon said. We will sign the trade accords, and then we will leave. We will go home. This will become a strange story. Remember the humans who used a tablecloth. That is what we need. A joke, a curiosity, not a mystery to be solved. Jay turned from the window. But Grash is not the only one. The Kel scientist, the TRRK historian. They were watching too closely, not with anger, with interest. Interest, the first step on the path to discovery. For a long moment, no one spoke. They were three people in a room holding the fuse to a bomb that could end their world. Their weapon was understanding. Their defense was misunderstanding. It was a terrifying balance. So, Sumin said, finally breaking the quiet. We finish our work. We remain calm. We remain empty. We give them no more clues to follow. It is all we can do, Chaiwon agreed. She stood up, seeming older than she had an hour before. Get some rest. Tomorrow we smile. We sign papers. We are bland, boring, and unremarkable. Our greatest triumph will be that nothing remarkable happens at all. Jay and Sumin returned to their small adjoining rooms. But sleep did not come easily. Jay lay in the dark, thinking not of empires, but of a single moment. The moment his fingers had pressed Baran's shoulder. The exact pressure. The specific angle. It was knowledge that felt like a doctor's knowledge. But in the eyes of the galaxy, it would be labeled a weapon. Sumin replayed the fight in her mind. Not with pride, but looking for errors. Had she been too precise? Had her calm been too perfect? Should she have pretended to be tired, to struggle? No, that would have invited more aggression. She had walked the only path available. The secret was safe for now, but it was like a deep, still crack in a wall. It had always been there, holding a tremendous weight apart. Today they had tapped the wall, and they had heard the hollow sound. They knew, and the smartest beings in the room had heard it too. The question was no longer if someone would investigate. The question was when, and what they would do when they found that the humans' greatest strength was the terrifying, galaxy-shattering power to make war itself seem like a childish, unnecessary thing. A power that, if known, would force the galaxy to choose. change everything they knew, or destroy the messenger. The night cycle deepened. The station slept. But in 100 quarters, data screens were lit. Recordings of the cultural exchange were being watched, slowed down, analyzed. Numbers scrolled. Muscle contractions were measured. The pressure point was identified and catalogued. The crack had been noted. The investigation had already begun. The final session of the summit was a quiet, formal affair. It was held in the same grand convocation chamber, but the mood was different. The air of gossip and challenge was gone, replaced by a focused tension. Delegates wanted to finish and leave. The human question hung in the room, unasked and unanswered. Ambassador Lee Chai-won sat perfectly still. Her face was a mask of polite attention. Jae and Sumin stood behind her, as they had on the first day. Their hands were empty. Their faces were calm. They were once again just shadows. But no one saw them as just shadows anymore. Commander Grash was at his post by the wall. He did not look at them. His massive arms were crossed, his gaze fixed on the floor. The angry fire in him had burned down to cold, hard ash. He had been defeated not by strength but by an idea. And he was thinking. On the chamber floor, the last of the trade accords was being read aloud. It was about the shipping lanes through the new star cluster. The Kel minister spoke, his voice smooth. The TRRK delegate clicked its agreement. It was all going smoothly. Too smoothly. A dispute flared. It was between the Ivan Compact, the delicate species with the stained robe, and a rival mining guild. It was about asteroid claims. The words were legal, but the tone was sharp. The Ivan delegate's voice trembled with outrage. The mining guild representative, a burly species with rocky skin, leaned forward, his voice a low, threatening rumble. He slammed a heavy fist on the table. The sound echoed. A line had been crossed. The careful peace of the final meeting shattered. Armed guards around the room shifted, their hands going to their weapons. Grash's head came up, his warrior instincts firing. His eyes scanned for the threat, for the target. His hand went to his rifle. This was what he understood. A clear conflict. A need for force to separate, to dominate, to control. But force here would be a disaster. A shot in this room could start a chain reaction. It could turn a legal dispute into a blood feud that would spill into the stars. Jae and Sumin moved. They did not move towards the arguing delegates. They did not put themselves in the middle. Instead, they moved like water finding cracks in stone. Jae walked slowly along the edge of the chamber, towards the mining guild's secondary aide. A younger individual who was nervously clutching a datapad. The aide was watching his boss. Scared of the escalation, Sumin moved in the other direction, towards a cluster of neutral observers who were beginning to look panicked, their fear of fuel that could feed the conflict. Jae stopped near the mining guild aide. He did not look at the furious boss. He looked at the aide's hands, white-knuckled on the datapad. In a voice so low it was almost lost, Jae spoke to the aide. The third clause, the mineral rights exception. It is still open for annotation. The aide's eyes flicked to Jae, confused. The words were so mundane, so technical, so utterly detached from the anger in the room. It was a lifeline to the normal world. The aide looked down at his datapad, his fingers unclenching slightly. He started to scroll, his mind forcibly pulled from panic to a familiar problem. The panic around him lost one source of fuel. Across the room, Sumin stood near the nervous neutrals. She did not tell them to be calm. She simply began to breathe, slowly and audibly, in and out, a deep, rhythmic sound, primal signal of safety. One of the neutrals, a furry being, unconsciously matched its breathing to hers. Its shaking slowed. Jae, seeing the mining guild boss about to shout again, made a small, subtle hand gesture to the Ivan's assistant, a gesture that meant pause, listen. It was a signal the assistant recognized from earlier private talks. The assistant tugged gently on his superior's silken sleeve. The Ivan delegate paused, mid-sentence, thrown off rhythm. Did I end that second of pause? Chai-won spoke. Her voice was not loud, but it was clear and cool, like a glass of water poured on hot coals. The objection is noted under Galactic Resolution 7. The claim is suspended for arbitration. The accord for the shipping lanes, however, is separate and ready. Shall we proceed with what is agreed? She had offered a path, a way out. She had framed the fight not as a battle to win, but as a sidebar to be handled later. She made the main task, signing the accord, seem simple and separate. The mining guild boss, his moment of rage interrupted, deflated. The legal path was still there. His show of force had been sidestepped. He grunted, a sound of concession. The Ivan delegate, still trembling, gave a sharp nod. The crisis was over. It had been dissolved. Not by a show of force but by a series of tiny, precise interventions. A word to the scared, a breath to the panicked, a gesture to the attentive, a legal path from the ambassador. The treaty was signed. The summit was concluded. As the delegates filed out, Grash remained. He watched Jay and Sumin. He had seen it all. He saw they had never reached for a weapon. They had never threatened. They had moved to the edges, to the weak points in the social structure, and they had offered calm. They had healed the conflict before it could bleed. He waited until Chai One and her guards were almost at the door. Then he strode over, blocking their path one final time. His expression was unreadable. Chai One looked up at him, her mask back in place. "Commander." Grash ignored her. He looked at Jay. "You're kind," he said, his voice a rough rumble. "You carry the weight of stopping wars before they start." "Why?" Jay met his gaze. He saw the confusion there, the crumbling of an old truth. He answered with the simple, heavy fact at the core of it all. "Because we are experts in the cost. We study the scars wars leave on children's minds, on a species' soul. It is a heavier burden than any weapon." Grash stared at him. He thought of his own young warriors, proud and fierce. He thought of the ones who did not come back, and the ones who came back broken in ways no medicine could fix. Scars on the soul. He had never had words for that. He gave a single, slow nod. It was not friendship. It was not understanding. It was recognition. He was recognizing a different kind of strength. A terrifying strength. He stepped aside. "The docking bay is clear," he said, his tone now just professional. He turned and walked away, back to his post. But he did not stand with his hand on his rifle. He stood with his arms at his sides, watching the room, thinking. The human delegation walked to their ship. No one stopped them. No one jeered. Inside the small, human vessel, the door sealed. The hum of their own engines was a familiar sound. Chai One sank into her chair. "He knows," she said quietly. "He knows a piece," Jay corrected, staring at the retreating station on the view screen. "He knows the what, not the how, not the training, not the secret." "It is enough," Sumin said. "For him, it is enough. For now." The ship pulled away from the station, moving into the dark, quiet sea of stars. Behind them, the galactic common station glittered, full of secrets and power and fear. On the station, Grash looked at the screen showing the departing human ship. He thought of the empty hands, the calm eyes, the peace that felt like a threat. He thought of scars on the soul. He turned to his second in command. "The human file," he said. "Mark it closed. No further inquiry." The younger Vorath was surprised. "But Commander, their techniques are not for us," Grash finished, his voice final. "They carry a burden we do not. Let them carry it." He walked away from the screen. The mystery of the defenseless human guards would remain. A story, a curiosity, a puzzle for the galaxy to wonder about. But Grash would not poke at it. He had seen the edge of the truth, and it was too deep, too quiet, and too heavy. It was a truth that could make his whole world seem childish and loud. The human ship jumped into faster-than-light travel. A flash of light and then gone. They were heading home. Their secret was still safe. It was hidden not in shadows anymore, but in plain sight, protected by the simple, staggering fact that it was easier for the galaxy to call them cowards than to face the revolutionary, peaceful truth they represented. Jay looked at the swirling stars of the jump drive. He thought of the weight they carried. It was a good weight. It was the weight of preventing screams that would never be heard, of stopping tears that would never be shed. It was the heavy, silent work of peace. And for now, that was enough.